Take all of the pieces from the packaging. Your apron kit should have two large pieces of fabric, one 4-inch piece, three long pieces, and two metal D rings. The long, thin pieces are neck and waist straps. Take the three long pieces to your iron. You will see that each piece has been folded in half and that one end has been cut to a point. Unfold the piece and fold the pointed side down, lining up the point with the fold of the fabric. The edges should be folded down about a half an inch, as shown in the video. Press this with the iron. Now turn the fabric lengthwise, parallel to your body, and fold the edge to just below the center fold. Press with the iron all the way to the end. Turn and repeat on the other side. Fold the long piece lengthwise again so that the edges line up and press from end to end. At your sewing machine, set your stitch length to about 2.5. Most of this design will be sewn with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, as shown. You may find it helpful to use a magnetic seam guide, especially if you are a beginner. Take the shortest piece to your sewing machine and line up the edge of your presser foot with the edge of the fabric. Stitch from top to bottom and repeat on the other side. Now take one of the long pieces and find the end where you folded it under. Again, with the presser foot lined up with the edge of the fabric, sew across the top until the end of the presser foot is even with the end of the fabric. With the needle down, raise the presser foot and pivot the fabric so that the long side is now under the needle. Put the presser foot back down and sew to the end, repeating the pivot and sewing up to the other side where the stitching began. Backstitch a few stitches to hold the stitching in place. Repeat the process for the other two long pieces. A large flat surface, open one of the large pieces of fabric with the right or pretty side facing up. It doesn't matter which piece you start with. Take the two D-rings and thread them through the shortest 4-inch strap. Fold in half so that the D-rings are held inside and pin it to the center of the shoulder section of the apron as shown. You may use clips or pins for this. It's a matter of personal preference. Take one of the long straps and find the ugly end, the end that you didn't fold under and press. This end will be encased inside of the apron, leaving the finished end visible. Pin this piece to the center of the other shoulder seam. Take the second long strap and pin it approximately 1 inch below the point of the underarm seam. Make sure that you are pinning the unfinished side so that the folded, finished end will be on the outside of your apron. Repeat on the other side. At your sewing machine, sew across each of the straps. Important! Never, ever, ever sew over pins. Remove them as your needle gets close to them. No matter what you've seen in other videos, it is dangerous to sew over pins. If your needle hits one just right, it can shatter the pin and send metal flakes into the air and maybe into your eye. Back at your flat surface, lay the apron piece down. It's optional, but I highly recommend grabbing a safety pin and pinning the strap ends to the center of the apron to keep them out of your way. Trust me, I've sewn more than one strap into a seam where it didn't belong and had to rip it out. Unfold the second apron body piece of fabric and place it on top of the piece with the straps, with the right or pretty sides together. Take a second and make sure that your pieces are both with the right sides facing each other. Line up the apron pieces, matching corners and points. Beginning at the top shoulder seam, pin the corner in place. Your pins should be pinned vertically into the fabric, not horizontally on the fabric. Pin the next corner, then move to the curved next seam. Line up the center. There is a line where the fabric has been pressed, and pin. Pin the next shoulder corner, then the next. Take your time and match your fabrics and corners as precisely as you are able. Proper pinning leads to proper seams. Take care as you pin to keep the straps in place and out of the way of the seam that you are pinning. Continue down the length of the apron, pinning every 6 inches or so. When you reach the bottom, you're going to leave an area 6 to 8 inches open so that you can turn the apron right side out. You may find it easier to mark this open area with a chalk marker or a fabric marker to remind yourself to stop sewing at this point and leave it open. At your sewing machine, begin at the bottom of the apron and sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, backstitching a few stitches at the beginning and end to hold the seams in place. Sew slowly across, taking care to make sure your fabric edges remain lined up and that you are not sewing over pins. Continue to the corner where you will pivot with the needle down as you did when sewing the straps. It's a good idea to stop and feel where the straps are periodically so that you don't accidentally catch one in the seam. Take your time. When you come to the area where the straps are sewn down, go a little slower. This is a thick seam and some machines may balk a little. Do a pivot just above the straps where the underarm seam begins. At the shoulder seam, you will pivot just as your needle is perfectly diagonal to the corner. Sew across to the next corner and pivot the same way. Now you are at the curve of the neckline. Go slow, letting the feed dogs of the machine pull the fabric as you gently guide it. Continue sewing as before, making sure to keep the straps of your seams out of your seams and pivoting at each corner. You will end on the bottom edge of the apron. Make sure you remember to leave the 6 to 8 inches open so you can turn it right side out. Clip each corner diagonally, taking care not to clip your stitches. This will make your corners less bulky and easier to open. Make vertical clips every few inches along the neckline, again making sure not to cut the stitches. This will help the curved seam lay flatter and look nicer. At your ironing board, fold back the open seam at the bottom, even with the sewn seam, and press it open and flat. This will make sewing this seam closed much easier. Repeat on both sides. Now for the fun part. Reach in and turn your apron right side out. With your finger, poke gently into each corner seam, making it as square as you are able. Don't push hard, you don't want to bust the seam you've just sewn. If you pinned your straps with a safety pin, this is the time to remove that pin. Back at your ironing board, take the edges of your apron and roll them between your fingers. You will be able to feel that seam inside begin to move and lay flat. This may be easier to do with slightly damp fabric. You may use spray starch, sizing, or even a gentle spritz of water. Roll and flatten the seam, ironing as you go. The aim is to have each side of the apron laying flat and even with neither side showing from the opposite side. Last step! At your sewing machine, begin at the bottom. Line the presser foot against the edge of the fabric and top stitch all the way around. Make sure that you catch the open seam in this stitching so that it gets sewn shut. Pay attention to where your straps are as you sew. It's easy to catch them in this seam. Backstitch a few stitches at the beginning and the end. You did it! You have a fully reversible functional apron and you made it. Thanks for watching.